Hey, welcome to Montana Sportscast Podcast. As we get ready to talk to our new Frontier Conference Commissioner, Bob Ritterod, Paul Panisko, and joining us, Dr. Scott Crawford is our new Frontier Conference Commissioner. Congratulations and good to meet you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate that very much. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. The interview process out in Helena back in June during my family vacation, and making the decision. But I'm thoroughly excited, and just trying to get ready to assume the reins September 1 and go from there. So appreciate the warm welcome and the opportunity to be with you guys today.
Why don't you give us what it's like to actually apply for this job? You know, you have certain. I mean, you know this region, but you've been in the NAIA. You have been a commissioner now for a number of years. What was it that drew you to the Frontier Conference and to go after this job?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have about 20 years of experience in the NAI. I initially worked with the Mid-South Conference based out in Kentucky. Then I was the Kentucky Intercollegiate Athletic Commissioner, Conference Commissioner for a couple of years. And then recently with the KCAC the past 16. So I've been able to see a number of conferences and see what they have done over time. Kent Paulson and I have been very good friends, good colleagues over that same time frame. I think Kent has 14, 15 years of time served in the Conference Commissioners Association with the NAI, and I just have a passion for the Intermountain West. Born in California, raised in Idaho, and the opportunity to get closer to family, to be back in that lifestyle of living in the Intermountain West was very, very attractive to me, to my family. It's not criticism of Kansas or my time in Kentucky. Those were very positive decisions for me, both personally and professionally. Just thoroughly pleased to have the opportunity to get out to Montana, to be back in the mountains, to enjoy the culture of living that way and doing things right, how the Frontier Conference and the Frontier family has been doing for a number of years now.
You know, the NAIA as a whole, we fight the same battles. Really doesn't matter where we're at. Obviously, school budgets, travel budgets, things of that nature, doesn't really matter where we're at. We all have those issues. But it certainly, I would like to get your take of the difference between the KCAC and like the Frontier with the idea of footprints, travel budgets, and issues that you see, kind of looking at the Frontier Conference as opposed to what you have dealt with historically.
So when I look at the Frontier, I think about it in two different ways. I think the membership of the full membership would be very similar in terms of footprint to what the KCAC is. Even though the KCAC has expanded to 14 schools, really it's about 6 hours across east to west, and it's about 6 hours north to south. And so that would be really similar if you're talking, Havre to Billings or Dillon to Billings, that kind of thing. Might be a little bit tighter actually in the Frontier. I know when you add in our football playing schools and having those trips down to Phoenix and out to Ashland and other parts of the conference, Boise and LaGrange, that's a little bit different there, but it's nice that it's a one-off situation with just a number of football games and not dealing with the schedule of, say, a volleyball or a basketball team or even a baseball team for that matter, which would be really challenging. So they're very similar in that respect. You're exactly right. The NAI doesn't matter if you're at the top of the totem pole or the bottom of the totem pole. You're going to be dealing with travel issues and budgets, and schools are always trying to figure out ways to deal with that. I'm an academic as well, so I'm not only is it a travel issue for me, it's an academic class time issue for me as well. Is how do we figure out our schedules in a way that really prevent kids from missing a lot of class? And so as we continue to progress with the Frontier, and I have influence on scheduling, that kind of thing, I'm going to be talking with the council of presidents and our athletics directors of how do we really minimize missed class time and maximize that, because these kids are first and foremost student athletes.
What is the national? Where is the Frontier Conference in the national conversation? We're certainly we're partial and probably beyond partial. It's just a sibling amongst all of us. But when you come from the KCAC and other parts of the country, what is the perception of the Frontier Conference, and what do people think of us, if you will?
Well, in your previous question, I failed to address it, but you talked about sort of where the frontier is and where the KC is or has been. When I came into the KCAC, it was probably the most restrictive athletics conference in the NAI in terms of contact with student athletes, the fall start practice time, et cetera. And so in many respects, I was very envious of other conferences, including the Frontier, that really were just taking the NAI rules and applying them, that way, and not adding additional restrictions. So for a number of years, I was having a lot of conversation with the KCAC presidents and others about how do we get on the same, really the same playing field, even up that, so that we're not getting negatively recruited against, et cetera. And so the KCAC now is where the Frontier has been for a number of years. So I view the Frontier very favorably. I think my fellow commissioners would view the Frontier very favorably. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer. You have to talk about the success of the Frontier as a football conference, and I think it's 6 or 7 national titles that were won during a pretty significant amount of time back in the early 2000s into the 2000 teens. And so I think people still remember that, and they still acknowledge the strength of Frontier football. I think people also are thinking about the Frontier as a conference that has had a tendency to be viewed as getting smaller, unfortunately. And so that's one of my jobs is to reinforce how do we get beyond that footprint of 6 full member schools to really show some vibrancy and some growth, because you're either growing or you're dying. I mean, there's really not a lot of middle ground in my book, and I think that the Frontier really is not dying. We just have a message that we need to convey to how to get our membership to that 8 to 10 or maybe even more full member schools and potentially some additional football playing schools.
How about I turn it over to you, Bob, or I'll just bogart the whole thing?
Well, I just want to kind of add on to that. I know that I have heard rumor, let's put it this way, that the Frontiers reached out to the North Dakota schools. There's 4 of them. Be Dickinson, Valley City, Mayville, and Jamestown. The North Star is in trouble. We know that for football, is they have 2 years to do something, or they lose their automatic qualifier. What's your thoughts on going that way, Scott, and making a 2-division conference, I guess?
I want to clarify one thing. Jamestown is in North Dakota, but they're not part of the North Star. They are part of the Great Plains Athletic Conference. And I think my understanding, and Corey Wester, the commissioner of the GPAC, and I are really good friends, good colleagues. And so I want to, if anyone's watching this, I want to be really clear. I don't know what kind of conversation has taken place with Jamestown. And frankly, I haven't taken the job yet. I am the commissioner, but I still have till September 1. So I have some plausible deniability for a little bit here, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I can tell you that I have not reached out to those schools, and that's I want everyone to really understand just the publicly and transparently that's always a painful part of this job and this business, right? And so I've been part of 4 member schools that have left other conferences to join the KCAC, and I know that's a difficult decision for a school to make, right? You have loyalties to a number of different publics, and one of those publics is your conference. And so, I want to be really transparent. I do view the North Star as a group that's in a little bit of trouble right now. And as a good NAIA guy, I want to make sure that those North Star schools don't have anything happen to them that would affect them from, to maybe closing their doors or that kind of thing. That really does not help the association by any means. Now, if there's the opportunity that one or more of those schools has a a real interest in the Frontier Conference, then we're going to explore that and we're going to have that conversation. But president to president and other conversations, I can't stop those. I can't slow those down. But Roger Turnus and I are also good friends and good colleagues, and I'm not going to do anything publicly or privately that's going to hurt the North Star Athletic Association. But surely, if there is an opportunity to help those schools, not just the North Dakota schools, but is there a way to do some things with sport expansion that would help the Frontier with some other sports? Because there's other schools in that group besides those North Dakota schools. There's a South Dakota school, and there's some school in Iowa, and there's a school in Wisconsin. It starts to get a little scary, though, right? You think potentially going from Southern Oregon and Ashland out to Wisconsin seems pretty dramatic, right? And other than maybe the Big 12 or the Big 10, there aren't very many geographically diverse conferences like that, right? So that could be real interesting with a small college budget that we're having to deal with.
Right. You bring up a great point, though, that that idea of where, it is kind of like a divorce. This isn't something, as fans, we all sit here and talk about the idea of different conferences and approaching schools and going, we should talk to so-and-so about joining the it isn't that easy. There is a lot that goes into it. And obviously you can't just go charging in. You have to tiptoe around some things and make sure it's done properly.
A funny story, and you're going to know that I have a sense of humor. I'm going to share things with you periodically as we get to know each other. But divorce is a great way of looking at this, and we don't want to upset families. We don't want to turn things over. We need to provide solutions to people that are making some tough decisions there. And so that I think that's a good way of looking at it. I'm very fortunate coming from the KCAC and working with we refer to them as the board of presidents in the KCAC. We built a 22-point evaluation, instrument basically to evaluate a school, and it was really about trying to make sure that an incoming school really met the needs of the conference. And I'm going to get myself in a little bit of trouble here, but I don't think it's the conference's job to pull up a school by its bootstraps. I think that's a school's job, right? And the school needs to make a case as to how it's going to help the conference. And so my position is the Frontier is vibrant, the Frontier is healthy, and we're looking for schools that want to be part of that kind of vibrancy, that kind of healthy school mentality. And that's what we're going to be doing here in the next 6 to 8 months.
Scott, you kind of touched on adding sports. And Paul and I have discussed this quite a bit last year on our podcast. What's the balance, though, between adding sports and the cost? And I think one of the big things is space, locker room space for more teams and those kind of situations. What's your thoughts on a good balance there for that?
So I couldn't agree with you more, Bob. It's that locker room. It's the facility issue. It's also how much can a staff really handle? Our sports information people, our athletic training staff, and others, our eligibility people. How much can they really handle? And I can tell you firsthand that we have grown a ton of sports in the KCAC. We're sponsoring 28, and we're trying to get men's and women's bowling off the ground, and also esports off the ground. And so you can really tax a staff if you're not careful. And so I've learned firsthand about that. The other interesting piece about the Frontier for me is I'm coming from a group of 14 schools that are all faith-based, private, not-for-profit institutions, and now I'm going out to the Frontier, where we have a mix of state schools and those faith-based institutions. And a state school may not look at sport expansion the same way that a not-for-profit faith-based institution that needs that for enrollment management. And so there's a real fine line that we have to deal with there. But, I want to look at, I'm trying to understand school needs and wants and help them address maybe some conference needs and wants. you have a school like Rocky Mountain that's playing soccer, and I'm probably going to be wrong in saying this, but I don't think any other school is playing soccer. Maybe Providence is playing soccer. How do we help? Was that in Carroll? I'm sorry. So that's when you start naming people off and you get yourself in big trouble, right? But how do we help them reduce some of their costs with that associated sport by keeping it closer to home and not having to travel so far? Are other schools in the conference even remotely interested in starting men's and women's soccer? And it needs to be both men's and women's, or it needs to be women's, because of some of those important balances we deal with there as well.
So what's your vision of the Frontier, Scott, say in a year, 3 years, and 5 years down the road?
Man, I feel like I'm going through the interview process again here, guys.
Yeah, you could have just brought that presentation and given it to us.
Why not, right? Well, so part of the application process was to give a 2-page document, and then obviously that was a big part of it. When I interviewed, I talked a lot about the potential with football, but the bigger elephant in the room is not football. It's the full membership piece. And so my vision of the Frontier over the next year is to have at least one school who has made a full declaration of intent to join the Frontier Conference. And there are options there, obviously. Ideally, it'd be 2. It'd be great to get to 2 full member schools, go from 6 to 8. And then potentially also tag in 1 to 2 football playing schools as well. Part of my vision is to maximize as many automatic berths that the Frontier Conference can claim, and help additional schools who don't get auto berths to have a really fighting chance at an at-large berth. And so, for example, football, the NAI this year, we're going to 20 teams in the postseason. It's a monumental change. I'm so grateful to the NAIA's Council of Presidents that heard the commissioners, heard the football coaches, and said we need to be consistent with those metrics. And now that we're approaching 100 schools in football, and 20% have an access ratio to get into postseason, we're going to go from 16 to 20. That's fantastic. And I have a vision for the Frontier getting 2 autos and potentially a 3rd at-large berth, claiming 3 of those 20 spots. That would be a best-case scenario for the Frontier Conference. But I'm not going to just focus on football. We're going to be talking about how we improve everything across the board. And I also have a long-term vision for us being a key NAI partner as a conference. Schools have been doing this already, but I'd like to see the conference take on the responsibility of hosting more national championship, either final sites or opening round sites, to really reduce a lot of costs for Frontier schools. And we already have a track record of doing that with the D1 women's tournament a couple of years ago. Now we're all one association in basketball. I'd love to see the Frontier Conference hosting every single year a men's and women's 1st and 2nd round basketball tournament for the association. So those are just parts of the vision that I have. In our pregame, before we got onto the recording, I talked a little bit about wanting to be better about video streaming, and I also really want to explore the idea of our conference having a radio network that we're really maximizing connection with alums and with potential recruits and with our current families in the Frontier Conference through that radio network as well. So those are some of the things that I'm going to be working on over the next 6 to 8 months.
One more thing, and we talked about the travel thing with football. What's the possibility of trying to get a major airline on board as a big corporate sponsor that we could, kind of help offset some of those flight costs to some of the football, for instance, to Arizona?
So you're going to be stretching my wheelhouse a little bit there, Bob, on that one. I know there's already been some talk, and I think there's already a sort of a plan in place with Arizona Christian. Fantastic add to the Frontier Conference. You take one of the premier football teams, top 20 teams in the country, one of the top teams out of the Sooner Athletic Conference and have them join the Frontier. Very strategic, strong move. I think there's already some partnership there. I think with Allegiant flying in and out of the state and down to Arizona. We definitely need to explore that. I can only build so many walls in a day, and so that's going to be something that would probably be more of a year 2, year 3 type project for me.
I will say, just even listening to you, I just the idea of even listening to you talk about your experience and your history at the NAI level, as a Frontier Conference person, the idea of the kind of calm it gives me knowing that we have somebody with 2 decades of knowledge of working inside the NAIA and making things work at our level, having that coming in as our commissioner is only going to benefit us, even day one. Even if somebody comes in here with a lot of other experience, but not really any NAIA experience, the value that you bring into the position day one is going to be a big help to what we're trying to move forward with.
So I'm going to slow you down. I'm going to start to under promise, and then I'm going to over deliver over time, guys. So, but one of the football coaches here former coaches here in the KCAC used to make a comment about one of our senior coaches and say, "Hey, Fran has forgotten more about football than I've ever learned." I'm starting to get to that point. I have 20 years, and I'm starting to forget some of the things I've even learned, and it's some of these things are so automatic for me now. But you don't learn this as a young person. You start to appreciate this as an older person. I put myself in that older person category. I am 53. I'm getting closer to AARP status than I am getting to some other kind of status, but it's about relationships, right? And the NAI is a great athletic association when it comes to relationships. And so I love going to the NAI convention. I get to know people there, and I've known several Frontier people. Every conference in the association, I know somebody, and I'm pretty well connected to them. So I appreciate the compliment that's the confidence booster, and that's something that will help. I hope it does, and my goal is to starting like September 7th is going to sort of let the cat out of the bag. I'm not going to be living in Montana until January, but I'm going to be in Montana quite a bit this fall. The Council of Presidents is allowing me to work remote, but I'm going to be out there a ton, and I'm coming out for a full week, and I'm going to be on every campus in the Frontier Conference in Montana, and I just want to start building those relationships with those ADs and presidents. So,
what excites you about the move?
It's not the snow, but. No, I mean, I mentioned earlier the lifestyle of being back in I'm a native of Twin Falls, Idaho, and just living in the West, the culture of the Mountain Time Zone, and the good balance between family life and work balance and those things. I think this is an ideal situation for the Crawford family. Looking forward to just understanding and resurrecting that mountain, kind of lifestyle that we're going to experience being in Montana, and be able to work with some of the best schools in the NAI. It's going to be a great mix for me and my family.
So you're going to start by moving in January.
Yeah.
I'm Polish, and that just doesn't seem real bright.
There are cracks right in the veneer here, so we'll figure some of that stuff out. You'll notice that my wife will not be in the vehicle with me when I'm making that trip out there, because she wouldn't be caught dead driving anywhere in the wintertime, let alone going to Montana. So when I had to spill the beans to her that Helena gets about 4 feet of snow annually, I had to break that down and say, well, that's only a couple inches per day, right? That's not in one bout kind of thing.
So have you decided, is that where you're going to land? Is in Helena? Is that kind of your current spot, or is it still up in the air?
Well, that seems to be a great central location for getting up to Havre, getting over to Billings, and getting down to Dillon. Butte being so close by, that kind of thing. I'm not averse to driving. That's not a big deal to me. I was coaching high school ball down in Colorado. I routinely had 2-3 hour trips to just for a high school basketball game. Same was true when I grew up in Twin Falls, and so I understand that. But being in a central location makes a lot of sense versus maybe going to one of the extreme distances. And this just I think this is out in the public, but I have family down in Twin Falls, and I have a family in Salt Lake City, and being within about a 6-hour drive of them is so attractive compared to a 16, 17, 18-hour drive from Wichita, Kansas. So
yeah. Well, good for you. And certainly we look forward to talking to you more and getting to know you more as we continue.
Well, Scott, absolutely. I got a couple of topics. I've been watching the Big Ten media days all day. I'm a big Cornhusker fan, and I don't want to get Paul going on that, but been watching that all day. And the transfer portal and the NIL. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, it's definitely changed the landscape of major college football. Me dealing with the NFHS, I know that there are actually some states that are allowing NIL in high school. What's your thoughts on, let's start with the transfer portal. Is that good or bad for the small schools?
I think we have a real conundrum on our hands, and I was just part of a task force in the NAI about this as well. I think what's happening is the national associations are really transferring the burden down to conferences, and what are conferences going to do in terms of limiting a student athlete's ability to transfer. And what I've seen so far is that most conferences have not changed their rules. And so I know we're trying to help student athletes with removing barriers to give them what they want, to be able to play for the school they want to play for, et cetera. But ultimately, the public needs to be reminded these kids are going to college. Even these elite kids that are playing at Division I programs, even the NBA and the NFL and others have really set their rules very different over the years to really make sure that these kids stay in school for at least 2-3 years before they move on to professional ranks. And then we're talking about just a very small percentage that are doing that. So I think we've done a disservice to the most of our kids, thinking that letting them transfer and be immediately eligible no matter where they want to go is this really helpful solution for them. The problem is they then are so far away from graduating that it actually may become a longer process to graduate. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have a transfer portal. I'm not saying that I wouldn't, but I'm not advocating for an NAI transfer portal either. I think we need to be a little bit tougher with these kids, and we need to help them understand, that we're being like their mom and dad and helping them make some tough decisions. But you have to choose a school. And I think and I know there's a lot of coaches that would be upset with me about saying this, but it isn't just about that coach. It's about the connection that student athlete has with the institution. And my favorite sort of metaphor or example that I share is I haven't seen a college diploma yet that has a coach's signature on it, has a president's or a chancellor's signature on it. And that's really important because, again, ultimately it's about getting that 4-year degree and setting yourself up for the rest of your life, not just the next 3 to 6 years or whatever that might be. Because even these kids that are leaving after 1 or 2 years, their professional careers are done in 3 to 4 years. Now they're 25, 26 years old, don't have a degree, and don't have a plan, spending money that they don't have, and it becomes a burden to society. So I'm not a big fan of the transfer portal, but it's beyond my ability to overly influence that. On the other hand, though, guys, I really like the NIL. I mean, I think that there is a way that these kids should be able to benefit from this somehow. I think boosters and athletic departments at the Division I level have gone to extreme levels that we're never going to see at the NAI level. But if there's a way for us to reward some kids that have some real skills when it comes to social media influencing and others, why are we not allowing them? They already can't have a job and play at the same time. There's not enough time in the day. Isn't there a way that we can help them a little bit with NIL so that they have the laundry money, that they have the the going out money, that kind of thing that their peers have because they're able to work while they're going to school. So I'm actually a little bit different position when it comes to NIL than I am the transfer portal. And the NAI has a partner called Open Doors. I think they're a great platform for NIL. I have endorsed them with the KCAC. I don't know if we'll endorse them with the Frontier Conference. I need to find out what the schools would want to do with that. But there are some ways that some kids can make some money by doing some pretty innocuous things, and be a little better about, a little bit better off financially, economically through NIL. So remains to be seen. And you're right about the high school piece. I think Missouri, their governor just announced, their state legislature announced that they're going to do NIL at the high school level. Where does this stop? And that's always the question, right? Is what's the level this is going to stop at? And it's not. I don't see it going away. I'm going to stop talking because I'm just starting to meander a little bit. So
I think I want to go back to the transfer rule. I think in the Frontier, if you transfer from one Frontier school to the next, you have to sit a year. I think that's still in.
That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And quite a few conferences in the NAI are still doing that. The KCAC does that. There's sort of a range. So you have conferences that say it's a 1-year mandatory sit. I won't quote any conference because I don't want to misquote anything, but I know there's conferences that it's a mandatory 1-year sit and there's no appeal process. In the KCAC, there is an appeal process. And, if your major of study gets shut down at school A and you go to school B, that probably is grounds for you to be able to continue receive financial assistance from the second school and be eligible to play. But it's just going to really vary from conference to conference. And as I stated earlier, it feels like even the NAI has somewhat allowed this to become a conference issue and not a national issue. And I'm a little bit concerned about how it leaves us commissioners and our presidents out there on an island all by ourselves.
All right, Paul, you got anything else?
I guess on the conference level, Commish, what are you looking at? What would be your ideal staff?
That's a great question. So I know that. So let me tell you a little bit about what the KCAC, where we arrived at, and then where it was sort of what I visioned for the Frontier. I'm very fortunate out here in Wichita. I have a staff of 2 additional full-time people. And then I also have I'm very fortunate. I have Dr. Carol Hunt from Tabor College, who the KCAC Board of Presidents authorized to help the conference office with a couple of very special ventures, primarily what we do with Champions of Character and also what we do with the Senior Women's Leader Program that the NAI established. So my personal view, we have in the Frontier, we have myself and we have a stipend for a media relations individual. Want to give a shout out to Wally Felt, who's been doing it for about 30 years and did announce his retirement. And so we will be in the process of finding somebody to do that. But it's probably going to be like a 10-hour-a-week kind of position. Long term, over the next 3 to 5 years, I'd like to have a second full-time person that's really helping with all aspects of the conference, not only sports information, but just our game day operations and other things like that would free me up to do the things that I do with relationships, sponsorships, and overall governance. So really would be good to get to a second full-time person, but not going to apply any pressure. I'm going to figure out a way to get there through external funding and not put any pressure on our schools to do that. With 6 full-time member schools, 1 person plus a stipend position is pretty manageable. When you got 14 schools, you need to have additional staff. And so it really comes down to what membership will look like and how that would, how do we really give the very best service to our member schools. And my view of the conference office is that of servant leadership. We are serving the needs of our member schools. We're not just there asking them to make token appearances to us and give us their taxes, so.
Good on you. I'll make sure Wally. We'll say you choked up a little bit because of Wally, but we'll let him think that. We all love Wally.
Yeah.
Another distinguished service person, as my understanding as well,
Right.
award recipient in the conference. So,
and rightly so. Wally's the man.
Yeah. He's been pretty faithful and pretty loyal for several years. That's for sure. Well, Scott, I want to thank you for coming on and joining us. It's kind of, I guess, Paul, we probably better start thinking about our podcast. As I looked at some schedules, and there's some teams probably going to start practice here next week or so. So
we're not far off.
We better get busy. And but I want to thank you, Scott, for coming on and visiting with us and giving us your thoughts. And like Paul says, we're looking forward to getting a chance to meet you in person and we're welcoming you with full arms. I'll tell you that right now. I just think your experience is just going to be so helpful, and looking forward to having you.
I'm thoroughly excited and thrilled to take on this new responsibility. I'm looking forward to get out on every campus. I hope that our sports information directors, their radio people, and others, will give me the opportunity to do other interviews like this. I just want to get a chance to talk about the joys and the wonderful aspects of the Frontier Conference that most people already know about. I just want to make sure that everyone's hearing about it. So
appreciate it.
Thank you.